Hello everyone, and welcome back to this corner of new Eridu. The update 1.7 is here, and for the first half of the update, we have a rerun of a physical anomaly agent, Jane Doe. I have pulled for Jane and her signature W engine back in version 1.1, so we have had slightly more than half a year together. And this video is my experience with Jane, compressed to roughly 15 minutes. Let's start with an explanation of how Jane plays. As a physical anomaly agent, Jane does the majority of her damage through assaults, nukes of damage that proc each time you fill the anomaly meter. With pretty much every move in the battle, Jane accumulates passion stream. Upon filling the meter, Jane enters a passion state, in which she has increased anomaly build-up rate and attack, and gets 1 point of a special basic attack called Salchow Jump. You can activate it by holding down basic attack. During this attack, Jane takes 40% less damage and is invulnerable during the finishing move, while applying quite a significant amount of physical anomaly. In the passion state, dealing damage with Jane consumes the passion stream. You can regenerate it by activating a perfect dodge or defensive assist, as well as during the Salchow Jump attack. After the passion stream runs out, you are back to square one to fill in the passion meter again. While playing Jane Doe, you need to keep an eye on enemy's anomaly meter. Her X special and ultimate do not trigger the anomaly until the animation of attack ends, so if you use them when the anomaly meter is getting close to being full, you might overcap and waste some of this anomaly application. On the other hand, the Salchow Jump can trigger the assault during the attack, so feel free to use it regardless of the anomaly meter. Jane Doe's core skill has a chance for the assault damage to crit. The crit damage is fixed at 50% at Mindscapes below M2, meaning that the assault will deal 150% damage in total. Her additional ability, when activated, increases Jane's anomaly buildup even further. As for the build, Jane primarily uses 4-piece Fun Metal set, since this bonus increases the damage dealt to the target by 35% after inflicting assault, and that's pretty much a guarantee when you are playing Jane Doe. As for the 2-piece, any of these three options will be fine. I personally would choose the one with the best substats, which for Jane would be anomaly proficiency and attack. If you're looking at increasing her anomaly damage and application as much as possible, Disc 4 should be an anomaly proficiency one. Disc 5 can be any from physical damage percent, attack percent, or even pen ratio, depending on your weapon and the team. And Disc 6 is an anomaly mastery one. The important milestone to reach is a certain number of anomaly proficiency. It comes from two Jane skills. First, the core. The chance for the assault damage to crit starts at 40%, increasing up to 100% with her anomaly proficiency. At core level F, 100% is reached at 375 anomaly proficiency value. Secondly, the attack bonus that she gets during the passion stream caps at 420 anomaly proficiency. So, if you want the full chance for the increased assault damage, aim at 375 anomaly proficiency, but know that taking this value to the 420 gets her an extra attack bonus. The assault damage scales with Jane Doe's level, attack and anomaly proficiency values, and her core. Notice how I haven't mentioned anything about skill levels yet. That's because Jane Doe's skill levels have no effect on her main source of damage, assault value. And further, they also don't affect anomaly application, which means that Jane can be brought to battle-ready state really fast and relatively cheaply. Now, eventually you will want to invest into Jane's skills to increase her overall damage, her basics, dodges, X specials, and ultimate in roughly that order. But it's just like a Pareto principle. 20% of effort with Jane gets you 80% of the damage. W engine-wise, Jane is not very picky. The best free-to-play weapon would be Weapon Gemini, but Rainforest Gourmet isn't that far off. Standard Weapon Fusion Compiler is good too, especially if you pair it with a pen ratio Disc 5. Jane's signature weapon, Sharpened Stinger, is obviously the best, and heavily rewards using her dodges. If you are considering going for Mindscapes, M1 gives an extra slot for the Salchow Jump point, so you can save them for when the enemy is staggered or stunned, to either not get hit too much or increase the damage. Her M2 is a good stopping point, since it increases the crit damage of assault value further by 50% and reduces enemy's defense by 15%. Mindscapes 3 and 5 that increase her skill levels are marginal, and Mindscape 4 increases all anomaly damage by 18%, so it's good for disorder teams. Mindscape 6 adds extra damage when triggering assault, and makes managing her passion state a bit easier. In my opinion, M0 Jane with a free-to-play W engine already feels like a complete strong character. If you want to invest just a little bit more, W engine is a good first stop, pushing you for slightly more aggressive and hyper-carry playstyle, with dodges being rewarded. The second investment that would pay off the most compared to its cost is Mindscape 2. Because of that, I wouldn't recommend going for Mindscape 1 alone if you don't have enough to guarantee the second one. As for the team comps, you do want to activate Jane's additional ability to maximize her physical anomaly buildup, so you need to have either an agent of the same faction or another anomaly agent. You probably wouldn't play her with Juyuan, and while other players have successfully teamed her up with Xingyi, they do compete with each other for the field time, and Jane in particular doesn't care about the stun too much. She wants to dodge from time to time to keep the passion state going, or, if you have it, her signature weapons bonus. Seth, on the other hand, is practically made for Jane. At the moment he's the only agent to buff anomaly proficiency, and with him only wanting to use his defensive assist, he is perfect for allowing Jane to keep staying on the field. For the same reason of wanting all the field time she can get, the best anomaly agent to activate the additional ability would be Burns. And most enemies that are weak to physical attribute are also weak to the fire, so they go pretty well together. New agent Vivian, for the moment, is a bit of a dark horse. Further playtesting with Jane is needed. I do plan on pulling Vivian, and after I playtest her for a couple of days, you can expect a detailed video analysis on her, including her synergy, or lack thereof, with Jane. So if you're interested in that, please don't forget to subscribe to not miss it. After we have fulfilled the additional ability, the third member of the team becomes very flexible. Free-to-play options include Lucy, Nicole, who might be a good pairing with Vivian, or even Polkra, especially at M6, or when taking advantage from aftershock buffs in the endgame modes. Rina works too, but you would want to go for pen ratio disc 5 or even fusion compiler as a weapon. For premium options, you have good general support such as Caesar, Astra Yao, or Trigger. Now, since we have discussed discs, weapons, and teams, I wanted to share with you my calculations on the topic of optimizing Jane's stats. Because of the dependence of attack value on the anomaly proficiency, balancing becomes a little bit complicated. For the first round of calculations, let's assume that you have pulled for the sharpened Stinger. Whip and Gemini calculations will be provided later in this section. After equipping Jane's signature, 2-piece anomaly proficiency, and fully leveled discs 2 and 4, you will start at 326 anomaly proficiency and about 2000 attack. In this table, columns are Jane's attack value and the increase by 3%. That's one disc roll going into attack. Rows are anomaly proficiency increasing by 9, same logic, value added by one disc roll. On the intersections of anomaly proficiency and attack values, you can see assault damage value to be hit by Jane with these stats, slightly simplified by not including general multipliers such as stun and so on, as they are independent from Jane's stats. But it does include the attack bonus Jane gets from the passion state. In order to make this table more readable, I am using color differentiation. So pick your Jane's attack and anomaly proficiency values and find the cell at their intersection. If you have landed on the teal cell, it means that you will want your next disc roll to go into anomaly proficiency. On the other hand, if you have landed on the maroon cell, that means that you will benefit from increasing attack. For example, let's take my Jane. She has 443 anomaly proficiency and 2800 attack. That lands me on teal cell, so a disc with extra roll going into anomaly proficiency is going to be more valuable for me. However, this is only an assault nuke value. With Jane being on the field, and you eventually investing into her skill levels, these small but constant attacks are going to add to her damage. Since enemies have different resistances, including attacks makes formulas much more complicated, so we will pick something average. For example, filling anomaly meter on level 60 Enforcer takes about a whole round of basic attacks and 1x special. If we add that into calculations, we will see that an attack roll becomes more valuable in general. Although for my Jane, anomaly proficiency roll still stays more preferable. Looking at these numbers, another interesting observation can be made. Even though anomaly proficiency roll is so valuable, you still wouldn't want for all these scrolls to go into anomaly proficiency. For example, the same assault values that can be reached with 21 rolls going solely into anomaly proficiency can also be reached with just 20 rolls, with 2 to 10 of them going into attack percent, which would make for an easier build to strive for. If you don't want to go for the sharpened stinger and would prefer to stick with Weapon Gemini, then here are the calculations for you, with slightly lower starting value for anomaly proficiency since Weapon Gemini's main stat is an attack percent. You might notice that the values are higher than in previous tables, but that's because Sharpened Stinger gives a buff to physical damage percent, which is applied to all damage equally, so I could skip it without it affecting the ratios. But Weapon Gemini buffs anomaly proficiency during the fight, and I had to account for that. The more consistently you can keep up with Weapon Gemini's stacks, the more valuable an attack roll becomes. Here is the difference between having one Weapon Gemini stack and all 4. Hopefully this section was useful for optimizing your Jane stats. I encourage you to save the table for your setup, and let's continue with the video. To sum it up, I think that Jane as an agent has higher damage floor by the virtue of being anomaly, and buffing assault damage effortlessly as long as you hit the needed anomaly proficiency value. But for the same reasons, Jane has a lower damage ceiling. Beyond giving her bigger buffs with teammates, squeezing out an extra disc roll into anomaly proficiency or attack, and not using ultimates when the anomaly meter is already full, you can't increase her damage too much. She is cheap to build and straightforward to play, so if you don't want another character that makes you spend an eternity in the mines, or breaks your fingers trying to keep up with the rotation, then Jane is great for you. Lastly, I wanted to talk about one issue with Jane. Well, not specifically with her, but more with the state of physical agents in the game at the moment. The problem is that while Jane is so easy to build and enjoyable to play, there is very limited content where Jane can shine at the moment. Recently she has gotten gear in the Lost Void, which makes her stronger and she feels refreshing to play, but I can't recommend pulling for an agent solely for that reason. When enemy resistance allow for it, she is decent in both towers, thanks to her shortened cooldown on the dodge, but at this point you might just bring a team with Caesar to care less about dodging. Or even bring an agent with good invincibility frames, such as Miyabi or Yanagi. Endgame modes that reset often, Shiryu Defense and Deadly Assault, haven't had physical weaknesses or even bonuses for quite a long time at this point. Physical weakness in Shiryu Defense often comes with a fire weakness or even ice weakness, so technically you don't need a physical agent to get S scores every reset. Enemy weaknesses are mostly tied to their types, with physical resistance commonly found in organic enemies. But Deadly Assault bosses are usually these big bodies that we fight at the grand finale of the chapter, but we have seen it already twice, how an antagonist starts as an organic enemy, but eventually ends up as an Ether weak boss. So I cannot confidently say that Deadly Assault will favor Jane anytime soon. But I want to note that we haven't had a limited physical attack agent yet, so hopefully eventually they're released, and then we get more content that Jane can excel at. As usual, if you like the character and their playstyle, then the pulling would be worth regardless of the endgame value. But for now, there is so little room for Jane to go all out. Thank you so much for watching. If this video has helped you to make a decision on whether or not to pull for Jane, please leave me a like and I will see you soon. Bye bye!